And let's work on an ILAC example. So I prepared a short case, but before I do that, there are 4 notes about the ILAC example I'm about to discuss. First, the purpose of this ILAC example is only to go through ILAC and to tell you how you're supposed to answer a problem question based on ILAC. And ILAC approach is very flexible. So what I'm about to tell you doesn't mean this is the only way of doing it. There are many different ways to do it. Okay? In this ILAC, of course, I had to cite some sources, but I didn't check the AGLC to make sure that the citations are correct. So please ignore the way I've cited. So it would be your responsibility to check and figure out how you're supposed to cite the legislation and case law. And this example is partly adopted from a practical guide to legal research book. And finally, the scenario, the legislation, the case law, the sources, the offenses, everything I use, they're all imaginary. Okay, nothing is accurate. Many matters are inconsistent with reality and how our law works. I just wanted to focus on ILAC, so I've simplified the stuff. So imagine that this case is from a parallel universe, okay? The law, the people, everything is so different there. Just focus on the ILAC. So here's the problem question. Dude, which is a common name in the parallel universe, and 3 of his friends, Dude 2, Dude 3, and Dude 4, attended the Unibar at the University of Wollongong, celebrating the submission of criminal assignment. Dude asks his friends, want to play a game? Dude 2 replies, I'm in, mate. Dude says, alright, rules are easy. We check my assignment submission for each incorrect AGLC referencing style. We have a whiskey shot. They all agree. They found 12 mistakes, and they all have 12 shots. Dude says that he's tired and wants to go back home. Dudes, that is Dude 2, Dude 3, Dude 4, say, alright bro, take care. On his way back, Dude notices someone is behind him. He turns and says, what's your problem? Why are you following me? What's your name? The stranger replies, my name is Kevin. I'm not following you. I'm just walking to my mate's flat. Leave me alone, you idiot. Dude loses control and says, you called me an idiot? You will regret it. Then punches Kevin and runs away. A witness calls 000, and an ambulance officer notes that Kevin's jaw is fractured. It takes the police around 5 hours to find Dude. As soon as Dude sees the police officers, he says, thank God you're here. Mate, I think someone has stolen my house. I can't find it. Could you find my house for me? One of the 2 police officers replies, don't worry, we will take you somewhere even better, and laughs out loud. So does Dude. Please review the CCTV, which clearly shows that Dude had 12 shots of whiskey. So now the question is, you're a solicitor working for the New South Wales Office of DPP. You are asked to advise the DPP whether you believe the Crown could charge Dude with assault. Now, what we're supposed to do here is to break down this question, because this looks like one question, whether they can charge him with assault, but there are actually more questions in it. There are sub-questions. So before I say anything about the sub-questions, see, in many problem questions you see something similar. It doesn't mean that you're supposed to take one side. It doesn't mean you should be biased and try to prove the assault. You should be neutral all the time. The only thing is suggests that at the very end, when you're concluding about this whole question, you should say, I advise the DPP, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you have to stay neutral all the time. Now, to break this down, the question would be like, how many different types of assault we have? So in New South Wales, we have many, but in the parallel universe, let's say, we have only 2 types of assaults. So the 2 types are common assault and assault causing bodily harm. What are the relevant sections? Common assault is Section 59, Criminal Law Act, 2095, Boogly. That's the jurisdiction in the parallel universe. If someone intentionally applies force to another person without their consent, the assault does not cause any injury, the maximum punishment is 2 years. Assault causing actual bodily harm, this one is Section 60, subsection 1 says, if a person assaults someone intentionally without their consent and causes actual bodily harm, the punishment is 10 years. If the person was intoxicated at the time of the offense, the maximum punishment is 12 years. And if the person was both intoxicated and committed the offense in the presence of a witness who is under 16, the maximum punishment is 15 years. Okay, so there should be actual bodily harm, and if there is actual bodily harm plus intoxication, that would be 12 years. I now understand the question because let's say I studied the material, and I know there are at least 2 issues, okay, and they're about assault. So what I'm supposed to do is to go back from the very beginning, read it again, highlight anything that seems relevant or important, or I can leave comments and say, okay, this bit is relevant to that section, or I don't know, stuff like that. So here is a quick example. So here is what is important. They had 12 whiskey shots because this is going to be relevant to the question of whether they were intoxicated. And I'm going to go down, show you again this bit. If the person was intoxicated at the time of the offense, the maximum punishment is 12 years. So that would be relevant to this. So I would leave a comment that section 60 of this act, subsection 2. So I would know that bit of the fact in the case is relevant to, if MIPO allows me, relevant to this subsection. So got rid of MIPO. So one more time from the top. I read the problem question 2-3 times. I look at the instruction, try to figure out what are the issues. And once I know what are the issues, I say, yep, you have 2 types of assaults. Then I go back from the beginning and try to highlight and comment on anything that is relevant, right? So we said it seems there are 2 issues here. And 2 issues, it means we need 2 sets of ILAC. So I put it here for you. Issue 1, then law application conclusion, ILAC. And then we have issue 2. Okay, and at the very end, we have overall conclusion, answering the question, how I'm going to consult the DPP. So you may wonder that, are you supposed to write things like this? Are you supposed to have a heading for issue, law, application, conclusion, and then another issue? And if you have 5 issues, that means you have to repeat this 5 times? The answer is yes. So in your submission, we don't expect you an introduction. We expect you to start with the issue. You may write a very brief introduction, like 2 lines that, yeah, this is how I'm going to break down my issues, but that's not necessary. And you don't need, of course, a cover page. What I expect to see is at the very beginning is issue number 1, and you write the question in front of it. I've written the matters for you here. So issue number 1, the question is whether or not dude has committed common assault. So we want to figure out whether it's common assault or not. So in the law section, I outline all the legal materials that is relevant to the question of whether this person has committed common assault. And when I say legal materials, that is the legislation and case law almost always when it comes to ILAC. So for ILAC questions, you got to use legislation and case law, the materials that you usually use in the court of law. So you don't use books, you don't use articles, websites, you don't cite lectures or seminars, only legislation and case law. Okay. So let's say under the law in the parallel universe, the only relevant legal matters are one is the legislation, section 59, which I say, yeah, it's about the person commits an assault if they intentionally apply force to a victim without their consent and causes no injury, that would be common assault. So see, I'm not copy pasting stuff. I'm trying to summarize. It's not a good summary, but you gotta summarize the relevant material. You shouldn't copy paste or write too much. So it's just like a point that what is this section about? And if you notice, I have used short title. So from now on, I'm not gonna write this whole thing. I'm just gonna refer to the short title. Again, that's an AGLC thing. Please check and figure out how you're supposed to do it. The other legal matter relevant is a case law. In a case, the court says that if the assault only turns the skin red, that is common assault. And that's it. Let's assume there is nothing else in the parallel universe. Now, in the application part, what I'm supposed to do is I look at the law. I see what are the requirements of the law. And then I look at the facts in the case and evaluate those requirements of the law. So what are the requirements here is that a person commits an assault if they intentionally apply force. So this is the first requirement. There is intention. It's not by mistake. The person is not running and hitting someone in the face. They just actually want to assault someone. So intentionally, that's the required number 1. Apply force. That's the required number 2. There should be a physical contact to a victim without their consent. Requirement number 3. Causes no injury. Requirement number 4. And we know that if the person's skin turns red, that's only common assault. It's not some other type of assault. Okay, so based on those requirements, I want to look at the facts. So how I'm writing my application, I have to constantly refer to the facts in the case. So I say there is no question that dude applied force. So I'm referring to one of the requirements, to Kevin. So that's one of the requirements. And there is no evidence that he, which is Kevin, consented to this act. Okay, so when I say there is no evidence, it might not be enough. So I'm talking about required number 2, whether there is any consent. And I'm just simply saying it because it's obvious, but we should not assume the marker knows what are we referring to. You gotta use the facts in the case, in the application part. If you don't, you won't get the mark. So I say, indeed, the fact that Kevin was a stranger and asked to leave me alone implies that Kevin did not consent to the punch. So I'm clarifying that there is no consent by using the facts in the case. Further, since dude says you called me an idiot, you will regret it, suggests that dude intentionally punched Kevin. So he says you regret it, so I wanna teach you a lesson. So there is the intention. So that's the other requirement. But according to the ambulance officer, Kevin's jaw fractured. That's an injury, and clearly more than turning the skin red. So this is an injury, and we said in the common assault causes no injury. And I also refer to the case law that says if the skin turns red, that's common assault. I'm saying it's more than turning the skin red. So it's more than the common assault. So again, for the last requirement, whether there is an injury, I refer to the facts in the case. Ambulance officer says blah blah blah. And then I conclude this. Since dude fractured Kevin's jaw, his action does not fall under section 59 of CLAP, which is common assault. So the conclusion is brief. And what it does is it directly answers the issue. What does the issue says? Whether or not dude has committed common assault. Section 59. So I answered that. Since dude fractured Kevin's jaw, his action does not fall under section B. So we don't expect you to write a paragraph. If there is any discussion in the conclusion, you're doing it wrong. Discussions are under application. Now, this was issue number 1. We are moving to issue number 2. Whether or not dude has committed an assault, which is actual bodily harm, the actual bodily harm type of assault. If yes, could it be an aggravated form? So with aggravated form, what I'm referring to, I'm going to go back up again and review what was the assault causing actual bodily harm. It says there's an assault someone intentionally without their consent causes actual bodily harm. So it's some type of injury. This is the aggravated form. If the person was intoxicated and they cause actual bodily harm. And this is another type of aggravated form. In the parallel universe, one more time, in the presence of witness under 16, plus the person is intoxicated. So one issue would be if the person assaults someone causing actual bodily harm, and the other is whether it could be any of these aggravated forms. Now I'm going back to issue number 2. So you might say, Armin, there are 2 questions here. You're not asking only whether that was assault causing actual bodily harm. You're asking whether it was aggravated form. And the answer is yes. So you can write 2 issues. So you can take this aggravated form and write it as the issue number 3, and that would totally be all right. So it depends on how you feel comfortable writing it. Okay, if you combine too many questions under one issue, the discussion would be too long. You may get confused, and you may not be able to address the question properly. So it's your decision. Sometimes you write it and you're like, oh, this is too long. I better, put this issue, sub-issue, as an independent issue. And The only good thing is when you can combine things. So here it's these things are you can combine them. Sometimes you can't. The only good thing is you may save some words, and because there is word limit, it could be a good idea. Now the law, I'm referring to all the legislation and relevant common law with respect to this question. So we have section 60 subsection 1 that if somebody assaults in a form of actual bodily harm, intentionally applies force without the other person's consent, causes actual bodily harm, one form of injury. In R versus Mori, I'm referring to Rick and Mori, refers to a fractured jaw as actual bodily harm. So that's the case law. Again, in parallel universe, we have that Tabaluga case, provides that if the assault only turns the skin red, so that's another case law. Again, see, I'm not writing a paragraph about this judgment. I'm just referring to the main point. According to section 60 subsection 2 of CLAP, there is a B missing. If the accused was intoxicated at the time of the offense, the punishment is 12 years. Okay, so the question is, what is intoxication? And if it is not addressed in the legislation, usually it is addressed in the common law. So I'm referring to R versus triple D. Intoxication should be proved by the OYE test. I just made up that term. Within 2 hours of the offense. So this is a kind of test, let's say the police, they do to figure out whether the person was intoxicated. In R versus Bro, the court says if the police couldn't conduct the OYE test within 2 hours, the behavior of the accused may be enough to suggest they were intoxicated. So if we don't have the test, it would be based on the behavior. And R versus X-Men says 10 shots of whiskey is enough for any person to become intoxicated for the purpose of section 60 subsection 1 of CLAP. Section 60 subsection 3 outlines that if there is a witness under 18 plus intoxication, sorry, this is 16, plus intoxication. I missed that. Bottom right, intoxication. Then the maximum punishment is 15 years. All right. Now, so I've written all the relevant legal stuff. I'm going to do the application. So I go back from the beginning. I look at what are the legal requirements, and then I assess them. So for actual bodily harm type of assault causing actual bodily harm, we need again intention. So that's one requirement. Apply force to a victim. That's another one. Without the person's consent, and then causes actual bodily harm. There are 4, right? So I say I already discussed that assault was intentional without Kevin's consent. I'm missing something. Intentional, Kevin's consent. Apply force. So we discussed apply force, which I missed here. So because I have already discussed it under issue 1, I don't need to discuss them again. I just say I already discussed them above. Or you may say discussed above. The next thing is whether there was actual bodily harm. So the ambulance officer reported that Kevin suffered from a fractured jaw, and such injury is considered actual bodily harm according to the case of Murray. So I'm referring again to the facts of the case that the ambulance officer said so, and according to this case, that would be assault causing actual bodily harm, or the type of injury is actual bodily harm. Then, so I know that now this is section 60 subsection 1 type of assault. I can write a conclusion here and start a new issue, so we can have an issue independently, or I can continue and add discussion about aggravated form of actual bodily harm. So section 60 subsection 2 requires the offender to be intoxicated, so this is the aggravated form. Police could not conduct the OYE test within 2 hours of the alleged offense. So according to this case, I can otherwise write it in this way. According to R versus triple D, blah, 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 to figure out whether the person was intoxicated at the time of the offense, you can conduct the OYE test within the 2 hours. But the police didn't do the test within the 2 hours. So there are different ways you can write it. I personally don't think this is the most clear way of writing it. But anyway. And because of what? Again, I'm referring to the facts of the case. Because dude was arrested 5 hours after the offense. So they couldn't conduct the test. So that's one way of figuring out whether the person was intoxicated. And unfortunately, we don't have it. But according to the 2 police officers who arrested him, his behavior suggests that he was intoxicated. So Why we can use the behavior for intoxication? Because in the case of R versus Bro, which we outlined in the law section, you can look at the behavior. And again, if you write this, you wouldn't get full mark. Why? Because you gotta say that dude was saying nonsense. He was saying, my house is stolen, like it has disappeared. And when the police officer laughed, dude also laughed. So you have to refer to the facts in the case to, clarify that how the police would say this person is clearly intoxicated. And then we have additional evidence to support our argument that dude was intoxicated. According to R versus X-Men, if a person has 10 shots of whiskey, that person is intoxicated. And according to the CCTV, dude had 12. So they had more. So all this suggests that he was intoxicated. Now, the other aggravated form of assault, actual bodily harm assault, was that whether there was a person under age of 16, present that was present at the time of the offense, and I say that if the person under 16 was present, then the maximum punishment is 15 years. Although there was a witness who called the ambulance, there is no clear evidence that suggests that that person was under 16. Why I kept writing 18? So we have the intoxication part. What we don't have whether the person was under 16, and that's all you write. So you don't need to be sure about something. Sometimes it's unclear. Sometimes you have to make assumptions. And here you say there's no evidence. We don't know. And you would be like, oh, the police can ask whether that person was 16, they may be able to find them. And yeah, that's true, but we don't have that information in this scenario. So we answer the question based on the facts we have, that there is no clear evidence. So at the end, we can conclude that dude's action falls squarely within the section 60, subsection 1. There's little doubt that dude would be found guilty of this offense if he was charged under this type of assault, which is assault causing actual bodily harm. What is missing here is that, see, if you combine two issues, these kind of things happen. So you gotta answer the other question that I combined under this issue, which it says, if yes, if it's actual bodily harm, could it be aggravated form? So you have to add that, it cannot be aggravated. It can be aggravated form because there is evidence that he was intoxicated. So the prosecution can go with the aggravated form, which prosecutors would like it because the maximum punishment is higher. And you then add that because we don't have information about the age of the witness, it cannot be section 60, subsection 2. So I missed that because I combined two issues and I totally forgot to add that. So I left this here as a point that you may forget, when you're combining stuff. So you have to go back and make sure you're answering the issues. The overall conclusion of this problem question is the answer to the problem question, to the main one. What is it? I go back to the top again. It says advise the DPP what they're supposed to do. So you briefly write that, it is unlikely they can charge dude under section 59, which is common assault, but the DPP would have a strong case to charge dude under section 60, subsection 1, and there is enough evidence to charge them on the aggravated form, which is because he was intoxicated. So you're at the end saying that section 60, subsection 2, which is the intoxicated form, is your priority, and that's what you recommend. And if there is any issue with the evidence, they can go with the normal form, which is section 60, subsection 1. I'm gonna go back here just in case you forgot what was this whole section 60 about. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that in ILAC, you're allowed to use dot points for the law part. You're not allowed to use dot points in the application. In the application, we expect you to write full sentences, make arguments, make discussions. So they're going to be like paragraphs, like this one. They're going to be paragraphs. So no dot points in the application part. Yeah, so in the conclusion, I said it is little doubt Or I suggest that you can say DPP has strong case. So can you see how I'm using the words? I'm not trying to be to say that I'm 100% certain about everything. You're allowed to write it that way, and that's the better way of writing. To say like there's a little doubt, there's a weak case, there's a strong case, it is likely, it is unlikely. This way of writing, okay? And in ILAC, we kind of don't care exactly what would be the conclusion. We don't expect you to reach a specific conclusion. What we care about is how you argue things, and based on that make the final conclusion. So if your argument is good and convincing, your conclusion could be like, yeah, it's not possible to charge dude under any of these sections, let's say. And your friend concludes that, yeah, there's a good case to find dude guilty of, let's say, this type of assault. And you both may receive full mark. Because what we care about is whether your argument is good. And in court of law, that's how it happens. It's like not like mathematics that we know exactly what's gonna be the outcome.